Hello, everyone. I just wanted to make a few remarks about the Board of Ethical Review case for this week, number 17-11, which has to do with conflict of interest or possible conflict of interest. Let's look at the facts first. Engineer a professional engineer, performs fire investigations and forensic engineering services as an employee of Company X in homeowners' fire damage claims, as well as other accident claims made by homeowners on their homeowners' insurance policies. Company X is owned by a major national property and casualty insurance company that provides homeowners insurance policies to customers. So they're very basic facts, maybe not quite as clear as they could be, but basic, simple facts. And the question, would it be ethical for Engineer A to perform forensic engineering services and fire investigations as an employee of Company X? Why is it even a question? That is, what is the basis for the ethical difficulty, if there is one, or on the face of it, there seems to be perhaps an ethical difficulty? It is a conflict of interest on the part of Engineer A. Possible conflict of interest. Why? Well, what a conflict of interest always has to do with conflicting interests, not between parties, but within one party. That is, we think of conflicting interests as being, well, two parties' interests conflict, somehow clash. And that is certainly the way that the expression is often used in common speech. But when it comes to professional ethics, it really has to do with the conflicts that may appear within one person. And that person here is Engineer A. And it really has to do with Engineer A's different roles and the way that those roles conflict. Engineer A is working for Company X to perform fire investigations made by homeowners. Company X is owned by a big insurance company. So the question is, what is the role of Engineer A, and whose interests is Engineer A serving? That is Engineer A primarily somebody who is serving the interests of the homeowners who are making the claim, or is Engineer A primarily serving the interests of the insurance company that may have to pay those claims? In that, Engineer A has conflicting roles. So the idea of conflict of interest is that you always have a primary interest in your role. Let's say a judge in a criminal trial has a primary interest of making sure that justice is done. If the defendant is the judge's brother, then that would present a conflict of interest, because the judge would then, on the face of it at least, have another interest in protecting his brother or her brother that would conflict with their primary interest of making sure that justice is done. So really, to resolve this case, I think, satisfactorily, the board would actually have to make a decision about what Engineer A's primary role was, what their primary interest was, whose interests they were serving. And on the basis of that, decide where the conflict comes in. For instance, the judge has to always go with their primary interest of making sure that justice is followed in the trial. And any interest that would conflict with that would mean the judge would have to step away, couldn't do their job. So if we look at it this way, we see things open up a little bit. For instance, this case 81-4 about the engineers who did consulting, had a consulting, employees of a consulting engineering firm, but also had the role of suggesting what suppliers to use. It's clear that their primary responsibility, the primary role, is to serve the interests of the clients of their consulting firm, their engineering firm, so that the conflicting interest is the interest of promoting these suppliers who give them gifts. It's a clear conflict of interest. Why? Because this outside or secondary interest conflicts with their primary role of serving interests of the clients of their firm. So that's a basic idea of conflict of interest, right? Is that conflict of interest is when some secondary or external interest conflicts with the carrying out of the primary duties that you have, the primary interest, which is to serve the needs of whomever it is that you're working for, right? Or you're doing your work for. The conclusion of this case about the fire insurance investigation is that it's probably not a conflict of interest. That is, the board has decided that despite the corporate ownership of his company being what could be a hostile party to the people who he's doing the investigations for, the homeowners, that this can actually be done. But it's quite important what they say in the conclusion, and that is disclosure. That is, if it's clear to the homeowners, that the engineer is ultimately the employee of the insurance company that they may be trying to, recover from, and who will be actively trying not to pay, right, if they can. If that disclosure is made, then it's okay. If the disclosure is not made, it's not okay. Right? That is, the last paragraph says, on the other hand, if engineer A's role is to appear to be employed by an independent company and conduct an independent investigation to determine the cause of the fire or other claims that the homeowners may be making against their homeowner's insurance policy, it would be unethical for engineer A to perform services, right? So disclosure is important, right? That is, if there's any kind of deception there, then it's clearly unethical. But if everything's out on the table, if the homeowners know that the insurance, the investigator who is looking into their, the validity of their claim, is in fact an agent of ultimately an insurance company, then it's okay. But if not, right, then there would be deception there. So that is often the case in questions of conflict of interest. That is, there may be a conflict of interest. That is, it could be that somebody has a secondary interest which might interfere with carrying out their primary interest as an agent of whoever it is. But if this is all out on the table and if all parties agree that it's okay, then it's a tolerable situation ethically. If not, if that disclosure is not made, then it's not tolerable ethically.